A month before the SATs, Jenny Reed, could see my score. Literally, it was just floating right above my head. But there was a catch. Every time I cracked open a prep book, my score would drop by 10 points. But if I skipped a day of school, it jumped right back up by 10, so I played the system. For a whole month, I barely lifted a finger. And on the day of the test, the number glowing over my head was a solid 1,560. When the scores finally dropped online, I'd scored a 500. And the 1,560, that was my little sister Patricia's score. My parents lost it. As punishment, they got me a grueling night shift job at a local electronics factory. That first night, a bunch of guys I'd never seen before cornered me in the parking lot and beat me half to death. Fading in and out of consciousness, I heard my sister's voice right by my ear. "You just had to one-up me, didn't you? Thought you were so smart, but you never figured out I was the one controlling that number over your head." The truth hit me like a physical blow. The score had been her trick all along. I opened my eyes and I was back. 1 month before the SATs, the number above my head read exactly 1,300. "Hey," my sister said, all fake sweetness. "Want to study together tonight? We can go over the practice tests." I looked at the stack of papers in my own hands. Without a word, I pulled out my lighter and set them on fire right there in the driveway. "Exams are coming," I said, watching the flames curl and blacken and die at my feet. "I'm not studying." My score ticked up to 1,310. Patricia's face arranged itself into a devastated, concerned older sister expression that I now recognized for exactly what it was, a costume. A performance she had been running on me for years. She tried again that evening, cornering me near the stairs with a stack of tutoring pamphlets and a speech about wasted potential. I shook her hand off my arm without looking at her. "Last-minute cramming is pointless. You go if you're so worried. I've got shows to watch." She gave me the whole speech then. Natural talent, carelessness, throwing away my future. Word for word, the same speech she delivered in the life I just lived, delivered with the same tilted head and the same wounded eyes. She was testing me, watching for any flicker of belief in the number still floating above my head. I met her gaze and smiled the way you smile at someone who doesn't know you've already read the ending. "Even if I never crack another book," I said, "I'll still beat you." Something moved behind her eyes, fast, dark, quickly covered. She turned and walked away radiating manufactured disappointment, and I watched the back of her head and thought, "You have no idea what's coming, little sister." Back in my room, the score climbed to 1,320. The moment I unzipped my backpack, it started sliding. By the time I'd read 3 pages of notes, it had dropped to 1,280 and was still falling, and I was completely ready for that. What I was not ready for was the voice on the other end of the call I was watching through the pinhole camera I'd installed in Patricia's room the night before. She was pacing, phone pressed to her cheek, speaking to someone I couldn't see on screen. "Why is it dropping so fast?" She said she wasn't studying. The voice that answered was flat and cold and utterly unbothered. "Stop panicking. Once it drops below 1,000, it detonates. Studying is a death sentence for her now. Just let it happen." The room went very quiet around me. I sat perfectly still with my notes open in my lap and the number above my head descending like a countdown, and I understood with absolute clarity that my little sister had not built this trap to embarrass me or steal my score or win some petty sibling competition. She had built it to kill me, and she had an accomplice I hadn't accounted for. Patricia's response came through the feed a half-second later, and it was the thing I will never fully forgive. She laughed, bright and relieved and genuinely delighted. "Good," she said. "She deserves it." The number hit 1,000 and turned a violent pulsing red. Every nerve in my body fired at once. I slammed the book shut, grabbed my keys, and walked out of the house at a pace that looked like someone going for a casual evening stroll and felt like someone walking away from a burning building. I did not breathe fully until I was 6 blocks away and could see 1,520 reflected in a shop window. At a bar downtown, I ordered a drink I didn't touch, rented the private back room for the night, and spent the next 4 hours covering every square inch of the walls in chalk. Formulas, vocabulary, essay structures, math theorems, reading comprehension frameworks. Everything I needed, organized by section, drilled into my memory through a method the cursed floating number couldn't see and couldn't punish. The score watched my hands. It didn't know my hands weren't the point. I had cracked it. The number monitored behavior. It couldn't monitor thought. And I had a very busy mind. I gave Patricia 9 days of exactly what she wanted to see. I watched reality TV in the living room at full volume. I complained about school in the hallway where she could hear. I skipped breakfast loudly, slept inostentatiously, and performed laziness with the commitment of someone who had trained for it. Every night after midnight I slipped out, returned to the bar's back room, and worked until my eyes burned and the chalk dust had settled into the creases of my hands. The number drifted between 1,510 and 1,545, and Patricia watched it with the focused satisfaction of a chess player 3 moves from checkmate. What she hadn't accounted for was that the number and the actual score were entirely separate things. The number was theater. The test would measure reality. And reality had been changing quietly in a chalk-covered back room every night for 9 days while she watched the theater and felt safe. Then came the first thing I hadn't planned for. 4 days before the SAT, I came home to find my chalk room gone, not just cleaned, stripped. The walls were blank white, the furniture rearranged, and sitting behind the bar's front counter was a woman I recognized instantly even though I had no business recognizing her. It was Dr. Lena Marsh, my high school guidance counselor. She looked at me with an expression that was not surprise. "I've been waiting for you, Jenny," she said. She slid a folder across the counter. Inside were photographs of me, at the chalk walls, working, night after night, time-stamped. "Patricia hired me to watch you 6 months ago," she said quietly. "Long before any of this started. She knew you'd figure out the number eventually. She needed to know what you'd do when you did." I stared at the photographs and felt the floor shift under me. This wasn't a trap Patricia had built in a panic when she realized I wasn't following the script. This was a trap she had built in advance, around the trap, knowing I would escape the first one. She hadn't underestimated me at all. She had counted on me being exactly smart enough to feel safe. Dr. Marsh folded her hands on the counter. "She wants you to know she's giving you one chance to walk away. Withdraw from the exam. Tell your parents you're not ready. And this ends." I looked at the folder. I looked at Dr. Marsh, and then I did something neither of them had prepared for. I smiled. "How much is she paying you?" Dr. Marsh blinked. "Excuse me?" "Because whatever it is," I said, "I'll double it." Dr. Marsh said nothing for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone, typed something, and slid it across the counter to me. It was a bank transfer confirmation. Patricia had paid her $40,000. I looked at that number for a long time. $40,000. My sister had spent $40,000 building a system to either destroy my future or kill me outright, and she had done it with money she didn't have a job to earn. I thought about where that money might have come from. I thought about our parents' joint account. The one they'd mentioned was looking thin lately, the one Dad had chalked up to inflation and grocery prices. Something cold and slow moved through me. I said, "I'll have $80,000 in your account by Friday." Dr. Marsh looked at me with an expression that was not quite disbelief. "You're 17, she said. "Where are you getting $80,000? "The same place Patricia got 40, I said. "Our parents. Except I'm going to ask them for it instead of stealing it, and I'm going to tell them exactly what it's for." She stared at me. "You tell them everything?" "Every word," I said. "Unless you'd rather just work for me." She picked up the folder, tapped it once on the counter, and said, "I'll need the first payment before the exam." I had a new accomplice. The night before the SAT, Patricia knocked on my door and offered to quiz me same as before, flashcards and performed concern. I looked at her in the doorway, and this time I saw the whole architecture of it. Every layer she had built, every contingency she had planned, the $40,000, the guidance counselor, the cold voice on the phone telling her to just let it detonate. I said, "I'm good," and put my headphones in. She lingered. She was recalculating. I could feel it. She pulled the door shut, and I sat up in the dark and thought about the second thing I hadn't expected, the thing Dr. Marsh had told me on her way out of the bar. Quietly, almost as an afterthought. That Patricia had not always been like this. That there had been a year, 3 years ago, when Patricia's own score had been sabotaged. Not by a floating number, but by a teacher who had altered her entrance exam results out of a grudge against our father. Patricia had lost a scholarship because of it. A full ride to a school she had wanted since she was 9 years old. She had never told our parents. She had just quietly rebuilt herself and pointed all that devastation somewhere. She had pointed it at me. I sat with that for a long time. It didn't make any of it okay. It didn't undo the parking lot, or the detonation trigger, or the $40,000, or the laugh. That bright, relieved, genuine laugh when she thought I was going to die. But it was the first time I thought of my sister as something other than a villain. She was a person who had been broken in a specific way and had chosen to break something else in return. She had chosen me. That was the part I wasn't going to forgive. But I understood it now, and understanding it changed what I wanted from the next morning. The test center smelled like sharpened pencils and fluorescent anxiety. Patricia and I were placed in the same room. She sat close enough to clock the number above my head. Glanced back once, saw 1,540. Nodded microscopically. Faced forward. The proctor said begin. I moved through it like a person who had spent 9 nights in a chalk room and one sleepless night deciding exactly who she wanted to be on the other side of all of this. When time was called, my hands were completely still. Scores came back 14 days later. Mine, 1,570. Patricia's, 1,480. She came down the hallway with her screen already out, color gone from her face, and shoved it toward me. I looked at her score and then I looked at her, really looked. Maybe for the first time in years, and I put my phone face down on the table. I know about the scholarship, I said. The teacher who changed your results. She went absolutely rigid. I know you didn't tell Mom and Dad. I know you lost the school you wanted because someone decided to use you to hurt our father. And I know that was real and it was wrong and you deserved better than that. The kitchen was completely silent. Patricia's mouth opened and closed once. Her eyes were doing something I hadn't seen from her in a very long time. That still doesn't explain the parking lot, I said. Or the detonation trigger. Or the $40,000 you took from Mom and Dad's account. She flinched at that last one. Hard. I'm not going to tell them, I said. You are. Today. And you're going to put it back. And then we're going to figure out how to get you into a school that actually deserves you, because, despite absolutely everything, you are the smartest person I have ever met and you just spent $40,000 proving it in the worst possible direction. She stared at me for so long I thought she might just turn around and walk back to her room. Then something in her face collapsed. Not dramatically, not with tears, just quietly. Like a wall that had been holding for too long finally deciding it was done. How did you get Dr. Marsh to flip? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I paid her more, I said. And I asked her nicely. Patricia looked at me. I looked back. You burned your practice tests, she said finally. In the driveway. I thought you were being an idiot. I know, I said. That was the point. For the first time in as long as I could remember, my little sister laughed. Not the bright, relieved someone is going to die laugh from the surveillance feed, but something smaller and more real, the laugh of a person who has just been completely and thoroughly outplayed and knows it. I picked up my bag. Come on, I said. We're going to talk to Mom and Dad together. She followed me out of the kitchen. Above my head, the number read 1,570. Above hers, for the first time I could see it too. Her real score, unmanipulated, floating quiet and gold in the morning light. It read 1,590. I stopped walking. I turned and looked at her. She met my eyes and had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. You actually would have beaten me, I said. Legitimately. Without any of this. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. I just didn't know that I knew. We walked to our parents' room together and I let her knock.